It's a real big challenge for teachers and parents, and they were talking about schools have anti-tobacco campaigns. Check to see if your district has one like the one we were at. That's another way that you can stay on top of it.
That's good, Dave. All right, so number one fact is tobacco companies do not tell the truth, okay? They are saying they're not marketing to kids. What a joke, right? So what a joke. So there's a lot of lie in this whole thing. So the traditional cigarette smoking is still a huge problem in Grant County. 1/3 of adults in Grant County smoke. 33% of all moms who give birth to babies smoke. That's terrible. We are number 1 and 2 in those two areas in the entire state. So it's a huge issue. But we've got an interesting, so the majority of your kids are not going to be tempted by the old traditional cigarettes, okay? And because they're, kind of nasty, they're easy to find, blah, blah, blah. So the tobacco company was losing market share. So they came up with vaping. Now originally, the original e-cigarettes that you probably remember coming back, they've been out quite a while. Like this would be like one that most of us would have seen. This is called Blue. And these were advertised originally as a way to quit smoking. They have never been approved as a quit smoking technique. Now there are people who have been able to use these to help them quit. But I mean, they are not approved as a smoking thing. So one of the other things that is such a big disappointment in our industry with this is that, as you saw, the sweatshirts go. So if you see kids sucking on the string, have you ever seen that in your class, David, on their hoodies? Okay. Some of the newer vaping devices do not create a cloud of smoke. So there was a few years ago when vaping first came out, they just looked like they were enveloped in smoke. Okay, that's a real given. Okay. So we have actually, that I'm not allowed to show it, but it was a snuck video on a phone. Happened to me at Marion High School. A substitute teacher was sitting behind the computer, and there were 3 kids vaping in the room, and everybody knew it, except the teacher. Okay, so it's happening all the time. It's happening in the bathrooms, happening in the buses, and it's also happening right in class. And because you don't have all of that smoke, and often now they have decided to take the smells out of them. Okay, so early on, some of these, and there again, we are not marketing to children or teens. Here's the name of this. This is what you fill the pods with. Juicy Blueberry Cotton Candy E-Juice. Okay? Not marketing to kids though, just so you know. Vanilla Tobacco Mint E-Juice. So once in a while, these smells sound like they have Fruity Tooty gum in. Or, they've had some kind of candy in their mouth. So these at all don't have that nicotine smell that like all of us can identify. Same way with the new marijuanas that they're using in vape machines. We'll talk a little bit more about that the second half because vaping has now become the number 1 gateway to drug use. The number 1 gateway. So it is critical, much like Jason said, be snooping your kids' stuff. I'm just saying. So I'm gonna leave some of these up here, but I want to show you. So this one can cost $1. Okay, you can get it. It's so funny going out and buying all these things with hospital money. Just saying. We didn't buy a watch. They wouldn't let me. So, I mean, this just looks like a fun colored. It does not have a writing. They do now. But when I bought this one, it didn't. So $1. Okay. Now, at the gas stations or the stores, obviously you're supposed to be over age to buy these. We all know how well that works with alcohol and cigarettes, right? The big problem is, and we did this, we tested it, I can go on the internet and it just says, are you over 21?
There's no age restriction.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you don't have to put anything in to prove your age. So it's very, very easy to get. And it's very popular. So there are situations that all of our kids are in now, even if they're what the world might call sheltered or protected, which is a great thing in my opinion, it is so everywhere. So the whole watch thing, and the hospital wouldn't let me buy one, they're kind of costly. But it does look like an iWatch or one of Fitbits. They actually have one now that's slimmer than what you saw in the video that looks just like a Fitbit. A lot of kids are wearing Fitbits. And they can keep that running during class, and every once in a while they just have to open the top and take a breath of it, okay? So very easy. They just came out with, we found now 3 at Justice that were confiscated, and they're inhalers, They look just like an albuterol inhaler. So now, how are you, and they even have the powder that comes out. So, you know, if the teacher says, I want to see your inhaler, or the nurse, if you don't have testing equipment, it's really difficult. If they don't have like a prescription. So it's rampant. It's rampant. I was so glad that you guys asked me to do this because it is so critical. And we are hearing as young as 2nd and 3rd grade, okay? Because when you have fruity tooty, cotton candy flavored stuff, kids are going to be attracted to it. There's just no way around it. This is my favorite one right here. Let's see. I'm trying to find somebody who has a mask on. You have a mask on. Okay. What does this say in this? Let me see. I don't have my bifocals on. Say, you gotta get your. What does that say right there at the bottom?
0 nicotine.
Okay. Read the name of the. What is the?
Oh, juicy e-juice, cookies and cream e-juice.
Okay. Now I want you to read this side.
Warning: this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.
Okay. On one side it says 0, but the way it says it is 0 milligrams per milliliter. But the 0 is what people see and they focus on. And most people don't turn around and look at all the ingredients, right? Okay, so now the problem is many of them are containing CBD oil and straight out marijuana. Okay, so we had an FDA inspector that was in the area and they went to 11 stores that sell e-juice like this. And they pulled them and they did tested on them. None of them are regulated by the FDA. None of them had the same amount of anything in them. And half of them had marijuana in them with no label on it. None. So they did the same thing with stores that are now selling CBD oil. That's another whole subject. I'll talk to you about that another day. CBD oil, there is some potential good medicinal out of it. But when people take it without working with their doctors, it can cause severe bleeding. It can interact with other medications. So never, that's just my only thing right there. CBD oil is not just the panacea to fix all your aches and pains or anything. So never do CBD oil without consulting with your physician. Okay, so I brought some of these. These are the ones that look like some of the drives or little phones. There's actually some now that look just like a smartphone too, that you can, instead of your ear things, you can use your ear thing to actually vape with. So these are the pods. This is what they fill up with the e-juice. This is the heat unit that makes it vape, okay? So, and we'll talk about how much is in this when we get to the PowerPoint. One other thing before we go to the PowerPoint I want to show you. I'm going to pass these around. These are another introduction tool to nicotine. These are cinnamon toothpicks. These are sour apple. And these are grape. So go ahead and open them and smell them. And toothpicks are legal in schools. Somebody catch it. Oh, sad, sorry. So toothpicks are legal in schools. When I was in 6th grade, which I know is ancient, but when I was in 6th grade, we used to get little bottles of cinnamon and dip our own toothpicks. We did it on the bus, we did it in the car. It was a big deal. Okay, well, flavored toothpicks are becoming a little more popular again, but many of them are laced with nicotine. So you're there again trying to get kids addicted. I mean, that's exactly what the market is trying to do. Okay, let's go with the PowerPoint. I'm going to go through some of it fast, okay? It's hard to believe, really. Okay, go ahead. I'm going to go fast through some of them. Okay, right there. Let's stay back. Okay, I want to show you this. Yeah, let's go back up a little bit. Okay, these are some questions for you. Most, you're given the answer, Dave, ahead of time. Okay, 99 point, there is one e-cigarette, quote unquote, that is manufactured that does not have nicotine in it. It is only sold in 11 stores in the United States. Okay, and that is because they want to be able to say this. Truth in advertising, nah. Okay, next one. So here's all the different kinds of e-cigarettes, what are health risks, what leads to it. For our age group that we're talking about here, from elementary through high school and even college, it's just a new cool thing. It's just a new cool thing, okay? So the next one, we'll talk a little bit about here. You guys are pretty aware of what nicotine is, so we'll go on through here. I don't know if you do know this, that, okay, Juul was the first e-cigarette that came out, Juul. You've probably all heard. They've already been sued like 23 times because of their advertising and what they're doing. But they have these, so also you can charge these electronic things right off your iPhone or your computer. So if your kids have extra things in school plugged in through a USB, they may very well be charging their e-cigarette or their vape, okay? So the problem with this is, I want you to read right here, a single Juul pod contains as much nicotine as 20 cigarettes. 20. Yes.
I'm sorry for my ignorance, but is a Juul the same thing as a vape?
Yes. It's the number one. It's like Kleenex is to tissues.
Thank you.
Okay? It's the name brand.
The other thing, because I'll be the first to admit myself, I used to vape.
Okay?
Juul does not have an automatic shut-off function. You can continually hit it, whereas most of the newer devices are setting time limits now. So that is one thing, Juul is still popular because it doesn't have that
Right.
cutoff.
Right. And it does not produce a lot of smoke or vapor. I call it smoke, but it's really vapor.
So, how many, I don't know how to phrase it, like, I know like a pack a day smoker, I know what that means, but how many times do you use
A pod,
a pod?
they can use up to 6 a day, sometimes 18.
It really depends.
We've heard of it 18.
120 cigarettes.
Yes, yes. So imagine what that's doing to a young person's body and a developing brain, because remember the brain is not fully developed to 22 to 24. And this does impact brain, leave alone lungs. Okay, now vaping does not cause the traditional lung cancer that we think of. That tar that we see in a traditional cigarette, which is usually what clogs up the lungs and causes circulation issues, heart issues, all of that. This is a whole different way that the nicotine comes. So it causes what's called popcorn lung, which is very similar now to COVID lung. The way the granulation that happens in the lung when someone who's been infected with the pneumonia part of COVID, it's sort of like a granulating. And the reason it's called popcorn lung is about 20 years ago, we discovered plants that were making popcorn like Weaver, where they're putting the butter additives into microwave popcorn. They were getting popcorn lung. They were, you know, kind of like the new black lung from the coal mines. Now people who work in the popcorn factories that put the butter in the popcorn, they have to wear ventilators because they'll get popcorn lung. So it's a whole new issue, but this causes blood pressure issues, and I've got some pictures of a local story that you'll see what happened to a 19-year-old. Okay, we'll go on. All right, this is a really kind of an interesting one. Look here. So a pack of cigarettes is about 20 milligrams of nicotine. Juul is 41. This is one pod, okay, which they do multiple pods. One puff bar, which I've showed you a few of those, is 50 milligrams. And one of the Sorum pods is 90 milligrams. So if you can see the bottom graphic, the difference in exposure that the kids are having, and it seems like nothing to them. Every single one of you would notice anybody that smoked 20 cigarettes a day. I mean, they can't hide it, right? The smell alone, even if you smoke in secret. Okay, so I've got a whole bunch up here to look at, so you can kind of stream by later, but I do want to get through here. Now, this one's pretty obvious. You know, pretty obvious. This is like a hookah. This is always for drugs, but now they have now made this into a watch, what you do in this. These are the kind of vaping things we first saw. You know, now we have a vaping bar in Indiana, or Marion, South Marion. So people will say this to us all the time. Oh, it's just water vapor. You know, we just put flavorings in and all that. So when you go to those bars, you can pick what you want. So you have this whole array of like these kind of flavors, and you can pick what it is. And you have this truth in advertising that says there's no nicotine. All of those bars put nicotine in those flavors. All of them, okay? So, and like I said, there's no consistency in the manufacturing. This is one that's been, there are a ton of markers right now, kids' highlighters, that look like this. So this one came out, and now this, I bought these a couple years ago. Now they'll even mark, like you saw in the video. So, it's not like you're just holding this, but you're not doing any highlighting with it. So that is really common. Okay, next slide. I should have had them printed out. Does harm brain development, which we mentioned a little bit. We said, yeah, true. We can kind of go through these a little faster. That's as fast as it'll go, right? Yeah. Okay, look here. This is what it controls: attention, learning, mood, and impulse. Anybody have trouble with your kids already in those areas? I'm just saying, right? Right? It's like the hallmark of kids, and especially when they become teenagers, right? Okay, so now we're going to just only add, gas to the fire when you're doing vaping. So, okay? Yeah, they do tend to smoke regular cigarettes and drugs in the future, but we're talking about this right now. It is not a harmless water vapor, which I just kind of talked about. This is what we use in the schools. We've been trying to get into 4th and 5th grade the last couple weeks. So these are just some of the harmful things that come, and they do still cause cancer, but they're not as much lung cancer. They're different kinds of cancer. Bladder cancer is the number one cause, and it's funny, my husband just got over that, and he's never smoked once. Okay, I want to show you this guy. He is from Grant County. This is him now, okay? When he was in his senior year of high school, he had started vaping. Now, he was not a constant vapor by any means. So when he had just graduated, in August 1st, when he was 19, he spent a day vaping. Okay, and then he didn't vape for a while. He got a new job. He was doing some things. He didn't vape. Okay, let's go to the next picture. This was a month after he vaped. A full month. What happened? The pressure change that happens in the lung because of vaping, which does not happen with traditional cigarettes, had caused this extra pressure buildup in the side bottom lobe, and it actually blown a hole, slowly blown a hole. So his entire lung collapsed, and then when that lung collapsed, there was a weakened wall in the other lung, and it collapsed. And he almost died. They couldn't get anything inflated. They couldn't get any oxygen into him, and he almost died. Okay, so go a little bit farther here. So you can see these are the tubes coming out of his lungs, trying to drain them, the blood out of them. So, I mean, this is a 19-year-old kid. Okay, hadn't had 20 years of vaping. This is the way they had to do the neuropunctures in the back and in the sides. You can see how much weight he lost. That very next, you saw his first picture. That's really where he is now. But his lungs have now collapsed twice since the beginning of 2020. He hasn't smoked or vaped in over 6 months. And the Christmas after this first event, he had a stroke that was caused by the vaping. Now, this guy lives in Grant County. His mother is a probation officer. So they're an aware family, right? But a lot of times, this occasional vaping doesn't seem like a big deal. I mean, we have, the tobacco companies have made it look like it's the new fad. It is a new fun thing. It's safe. It's not like traditional. Who would use those old nasty cigarettes? Okay, I think let's go on here. So this is kind of interesting. If you'll see the difference here from 2011 to 2014, poisoning calls coming to the poison center from e-cigarettes have skyrocketed. Look at that number going. And you know they're not even all being called in. I mean, that's just a given. Okay, next slide. So here shows in like all classes of the different ages. Now 2020 looks low, but that was only the first quarter. So you can tell it's going to skyrocket. All right, this is another issue that's been happening. These are all electronic, heated. It has to be heated in some way to have it. So all of these have a heat element in them. Okay, and they actually have blown up and or have caused terrible burns. We've had several at the hospital. We had a person at the hospital vaping, which we hadn't noticed yet, had oxygen tube on. Okay, and it caught the actual tube on fire. Of course, where all the tube went, it went right down the bed, lit up the sheets. I mean, it was a big old deal. And the person had like a permanent mark from the oxygen cannula. So they'll put it in their pockets, even if they're not using them. The battery, just like she said, some of them don't shut off. And in their legs get burned from in their pockets. Purses have been caught on fire. Backpacks have been caught on fire. Obviously, you can see what it can do to the mouth. So these are some of the really scary parts of vaping. Okay, 78% increase in high school students. And I hate to tell you, but we are seeing more and more in elementary and middle school here in Grant County. Now, if your kids are at Christian schools like King's Academy, Lakeview, St. Paul, unfortunately, we are starting to see it a little bit more there. It's just because, and frankly, I just heard a recent story of kids getting exposed through church. Other kids trying to teach them how to do it. It's no big harm. People have been so misguided by it. The newest, let's go on, Dave. Let me just see. I can't even remember what's on my PowerPoint. Okay, so yeah, obviously the cigarette companies are really in this game. And they've been sued so many times and they don't even care. So now the big like Camel and some of the big name brands are actually creating subsidy companies. These three are the main three that are supporting vapes. So you can see here, Cool is now blue. Marlboro is marketing Elite. So they have shifted to where you don't have this immediate gut reaction. Oh, it's a Marlboro cigarette product. I don't want a Marlboro's. I mean, any of us who, well, none of you are old enough to have grown up with commercials like I did, but so they've really tried to change that. Okay, so kind of gone through that, and I really wanted you to see the pictures of Johnny, because that was terrifying with him not even being a regular vapor. And his life has really changed. Okay, there was one more I think I wanted to get to. Not yet. He's just now allowed his pictures, and he allows his mom to talk. I think it's still too close to him, to be really honest. So once a year, our tobacco coalition that's based at the hospital, we go to places that sell cigarettes. And you watch how they advertise. So the next time you're at the pump, often the flavors are advertised low. E-cigarettes are usually very close to where there's candy at the counter. A lot of the cigarette, especially this kind of product, is very easy for kids' eyes to just catch. They're not behind the counter like cigarettes. They're usually up on the counter, and then the advertising is low, usually by snacks. Okay, no, we're good. So let's go ahead. That's good. We can take that one off. I may, if I have time, I may do one more of those, but probably won't have time because I'm a big talker. Okay, so the next step from this is now many of these are being filled with marijuana. Okay, they're mixing the nicotine and marijuana, a terrible mix. So we are now seeing a lot of kids, because marijuana is legal in several states, okay? Indiana's considering making it legal for medical use, okay? We know heroin and cocaine originally were used for medical. So it seems like everything that can be developed that might have some positive impact, we in our sinful state have a way of blowing it up for wrong reasons. So marijuana, I mean, you can go to IW, you can go to Taylor, you can go to Anderson University and find a ton of young people that are using marijuana because it's easy to rationalize. If some states have legalized it, it's legal in Michigan, okay? So we're just slow here, right? But the problem is more and more data, now that it's being legalized and we can actually track it, more and more data is coming out of the extreme changes in the brain for recreational marijuana smoking, especially high school and college. So now that it is recreational, in most places, we don't think it's a big deal. Everybody, you know, in the government, if you're going to approve it, like we know how right the government is on so many things. But you're going to hear a little biased here, just FYI, conditioner. So now what we had just happened about 4 months ago, because most of you might not know, but I work with a lot of people in recovery and people that are in active addiction. Well, in the police department, we just had a large shipment of marijuana come up from Indy. And they're a heroin dealer too, also, because I-69 between Detroit and Indianapolis is a hot spot for drugs. And so this shipment was coming up, and fortunately, our law enforcement was able to intercept it before it got to our dealers here. Very interesting, because the deal was, if you buy this much heroin, we'll give you this much free marijuana. Okay, drug dealers love free, right? Find out all of those marijuana cigarettes were laced with heroin. So you have an unsuspecting college student who is recreationally, periodically using marijuana. They get one of this batch, guess what they're going to be addicted to? It turns on the receptors for heroin. Well, big shock that the drug dealers want to do that, right? Okay, so now we're hearing more and more, too, of even fentanyl. And you've heard how terrible fentanyl can be. It's very deadly. Being laced into heroin and laced into marijuana, and it's now being laced into methamphetamines. So when a drug dealer is making their stuff, there's no FDA control. There's nobody checking it out. There's nobody that knows if it's pure or not. So and I was hoping John could join me today, and I asked him, he's in recovery, and he loves to speak to parent groups, and it might be a great one to have him come. Maybe when we do another one of these. He actually got called. He was on call. So I asked him some questions. He's a single dad. He has 2 daughters. And he was in active addiction for 22 years. And he would talk about, he was raised with good parents. He was raised in church. He didn't go to college. He got a job at a factory. And little by little, he said, somehow I didn't learn the lesson to be resilient. I didn't learn the lesson on how to push through hard times. So he said, if I needed to clean the house, I would take this drug. If I needed to go to a family reunion that might be stressful, then I'm going to take this drug. He had a whole, he had 10 or 12 that he was using to deal with everyday normal stuff that we deal with. So he said when he became clean, he was at the methadone clinic, and he has an amazing redemption story, but he said, I walked out with that, I just had my injection, he had to take home for the weekend. He said, I walked out, and he said, God just hit me and said, you got to stop. He'd lost his girls. I mean, he had divorced, he'd lost his girls, and his girls light up his life. His Facebook is so fun on how much he's celebrating his kids. He has them back now. He's earned them back. But he talked about how God just put him on the ground, literally, face down. And he called the methadone clinic and said, I won't be back. And they said, well, you'll probably die because we have to wean you down. He said, no, I'm not going to, because God just touched me. He has a great story, and I wish he could have been here. He's got, he's like tattoo man, just saying. At first, I'm old enough, I still struggle a little bit with that. I don't really have any tattoos, and I'm not against anybody who has tattoos. It's just his entire arm, but it's all about his faith. It is really cool. You know, it looks like he has a sleeve on, but he doesn't. But he has a powerful story. So I asked him, I said, what should I tell them? He said, and I think I heard Jason must have talked about this a little bit. He said, you're paying for the phones, you're paying for the computer, you be in them. You be in them. He said, do not let kids have phones or tablets or computers in their rooms. They need to be using them out where you can see them. Because one of the things that caught him early was pornography. And he said, once you ramp up any kind of addictive behavior, then other addictive behaviors, so like this, you know, even addictive eating, all of this addictive behaviors, that means we have a tendency towards, and I don't stand up here as any skinny mini. You know, I enjoy eating. I don't really feel like I have an addiction, but sometimes I wonder, you know, so you have to think about any of this kind of behavior leads to opening more receptors. So let me tell you why we have such a big drug problem right now. When I was growing up, I was a kid in the 60s, but a youth in the 70s. And of course, the 60s is when drug use blew up in the United States, just blew up. We'd always had some. I mean, all cultures have had, it's in the Bible if you really read it. But it just blew up because all that young people group was against everybody that was over 25. You know, everything was bad about the United States. Every anti-establishmentarianism was the big word. You know, the Vietnam War was going on, the civil rights stuff was going on, lots of bad things that were happening in our country. Well, I think we have a similar stuff going on now, okay? But anyway, this drug explosion, the majority of young people who used drugs in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was experimental and rebellion. That was the main reason people got involved. So in the early 90s, Okay, have you ever been to a doctor, and I'm looking at my clock, ever been to a doctor and they ask you, on a scale of 0 to 10, what do they ask you? Your pain level, okay? We never used to do that. Hospitals and doctors have always cared about your pain level, but now we have to put it on a scale. And our reimbursement from insurances is based on how you answer that question. Okay? So pain has become the 5th vital sign, just like your heart rate, your blood pressure, your breathing, and now how's your pain level? So I was down in ER one day, and they went up and asked this person who came in and said, you know, what is your pain level? 10 being the worst pain you've ever experienced and 0 being none. And this person, who we found out later was obviously a drug seeker, said they were at 10 and they were playing Candy Crush on their phone. Okay, I don't know how many of you have ever had extreme pain, but you're not going to be concentrating on Candy Crush, okay? Just saying. But it's a subjective thing, so we as providers can't say, oh, I don't really believe you. Let's redo this. So then people seeking drugs started giving really low scores. When we get the questionnaire and says, how was your pain controlled, they would say terrible, then our reimbursement would drop from insurance companies, from Medicare, Medicaid. Well, fortunately, a few years ago, Marion General said, we don't care. We don't care. We have so much less pain meds going out of our ER, so much less going out of our dental offices, so much less going out, because we now have a lot of legitimate people that got hooked on pain medications. Because of this whole emphasis that we have told our society that you should never be uncomfortable and you shouldn't have pain. There is an expectation now that the medical world is going to keep you from having pain. There's an expectation that counselors and therapists are going to keep you from suffering trauma in your family. We're going to get over all of it. So this feel good, feel better mentality has just fed into the whole drug use thing. We had a doctor not too long ago, the DEA came in, investigating. He'd been a good doctor here for years, but he kind of lost his way, prescribing way too much drugs. He was prescribing drugs for sex in the room. Right here. And you would all recognize many of you would probably recognize his name. So even doctors can be corrupted by this draw. So this addictive behavior, sleeping meds can also lead to this. For people who struggle with insomnia, Ambien, Lunesta, all of those can trigger the responses that you needed. So anyone who's been on Ambien 7-10 years, I tell you what, if they can't get that next prescription, they're panicked because they're not going to be able to sleep. I'm not going to be able to sleep for 3 days. Now, some people really need that and your body takes it up, but you have to be really careful. Just knowing that this is addictive. So that's number one, was the pain scale. The second thing is, when I was young, we didn't have any organized girls sports. I mean, you just didn't, okay? I mean, I played sports, but it was with the youth group or the kids from church, and we played out in our yard. And so now, girls have everything available to them, okay? Many of our kids are playing 3 to 4 sports a year, round the clock. So when it's not that season in school, now you're on a traveling team, okay? Not to say any of those are bad, but our kids' joints aren't made for that, to be really honest. The more sports they're in, the more chance of what? Injury. So when they have significant injuries at young ages and they go and they have a break or an ACL tear or whatever, what is used to give them some level of comfort? Okay, so we have now introduced opiates into young people at a much younger age than ever was before. It's not really bad or good, but it is definitely part of the ongoing issue. The other thing that is studies are being done, and they do not have a direct correlation on this, where a cause and effect, I should say, but they're seeing correlation that, and not to say any of these things are wrong for us as parents, for kids that are on ADHD meds, they are at higher risk because you're introducing scheduled drugs, narcotics into their brain receptors, and many of our kids need them. I mean, I am not against those at all, but as parents, we need to be a little bit more mindful of what that could set them up for. Like I said, there's no cause and effect, but you just want to be more mindful in case that could be the issue. Definitely don't stop using those. That is not at all what I'm trying to say, other than it may make your child a little bit more at risk. And some of you in here have adopted kids or kids that are from maybe a lot of hardships or bring some baggage from even infancy. So all of that is just a little bit more to make you aware. So another thing I asked John, he just said you have to keep open dialogue with your kids. Don't let them shut the doors in their rooms. I found that interesting because the opposite of addiction is relationship. Now listen to that. The opposite of addiction is relationship. He said, isolation feeds all these kinds of addictions. Isolation, when you have to do it in secret, that's what the one parent said. If you have to hide it, it's wrong. But a lot of our kids don't see that. I mean, we all know that, right? Huh? Oh, yeah, we didn't. Well, I had a key, and Jacob always knew I could find it very quickly. But you really do have to be. So one of my coworkers who her mother started using with her at age 11 with her and her friends. And she's been in jail. She lost her kids, and she is 37, and her and her ex are back together, and they have 3 kids. Her oldest kid is 17, and she is pregnant. Big surprise, right? And so she's really struggling, and because of the damage that she did to her kids, she lost them. Their grandparents had to raise them for a long time because they were both in jail for dealing. And so she said, I overcompensate because I know I caused their problems. So she has trouble saying no. She has trouble limiting their phone use and their computer use. So there are phone apps out there, Jason may have covered them, that actually will shut the phones down after so much hours of use. You can put filters on them. The phones are terrible, but this is also for sexual predators. I mean, there's so many areas that our kids can get in trouble on their phones. So one of our families here has a 12-year-old grandson who happens to go to Oak Hill. He is the only one in his class without a smartphone, and the rest of the kids look down on him.
And how old? What was the age?
Huh?
12.
Yeah, 12. And his parents don't want him to have one. And I applaud that. But yet this kid is bearing kind of the shame of not having a cell phone. So we have to help our kids step above that. Oh, your parents take away your phone? I know one family, one of our peer supports, when anybody has a sleepover with his girls, he collects all the phones. All of them. The minute they walk in, he said, if your parents try and get you, I'll hear it. He won't let them have their phones because they share it. They get something up on their phone and they pass it around. So drugs can be ordered online easily, very easily. And so can, obviously, vaping. So I have just a few handouts up here. This is just kind of a summary of electronic cigarettes. And in reality, electronic cigarettes is kind of these are all electronic cigarettes. The hoodies, the watches, jackets, backpacks. I don't know if they showed the backpack one. So I'd encourage you to take one because it just kind of gives you another. If you have tobacco smokers in your family, probably most of us do, we have used this, and it's actually a couple years old, but it helps people. We did a health fair at Missinwall Junior High, and the janitor guy was helping us get all our power and everything at our booth. And so he picked up one of these, and he was looking at it, and he was probably in his 50s. And he looked down here because it talks about the cost. If you buy this many packs a day, it just won't pull. He pulled it. He said, crud, I could have bought a new Mercedes. And he threw his cigarettes in this trash right there. He said, I'm going to quit. So one thing that, if you're monitoring even your kids' spending, but unfortunately kids give these away too. They give the pods away. They give the liquids.
That's what I was going to ask, because, it seems that there should be an expense to this. Like you just said, it's really easy to order drugs online. Don't you have to have a credit card? I mean,
And when are they delivered? Do parents not know when stuff's delivered to the house?
right, like how?
Well, there is a very easy way to get a PayPal account off of somebody else's credit card. So if you have a dealer that's planted a kid in a school, they'll give them a PayPal account that has multiple users. They're very smart.
My niece says they just go to the gas station and sweet you guys.
Yeah. Gas stations do sell them easy.
For cash, you mean?
Yeah.
Aren't they expensive?
Some of them are.
I know you
Some of them are.
a dollar.
Yeah.
but-
They're also really easily accessible. I mean, they can go right in there, and most of them, the cashiers are like hidden almost behind there, and the kid can be shorter and talking to them or having them,
Put them in their pocket.
and they just take them right off.
Yep. They are very accessible. Very.
And they do give them away.
Yes, they do. Obviously trying to hook people.
Yes, and I thought they were lying, but they're not lying. Right. You just give them.
So the other thing that, I'll pass around some of these too. The other thing that John told me to let you guys know about some of these juices, pretty fascinating. Yeah, I won't. Don't believe me. And, you know, between things here, I don't believe it's an outlier even in our own youth group here, to be really honest. So we all like to think our kids aren't susceptible to some of this, but they are, and they're kind of tricky. The other thing, I'm looking here what John told me to tell you, he said, always watch your kids' eyes. He said, when they can't look at you straight in the eye very often, that's a big sign that something is going on. And he said if their eyes avert easy or there's a lot of changes in their eye movement, they're probably on something. He said those are one of the first signs that he saw. He said the next thing would obviously be isolation. If they just, it's like a parent walks in the room, why are you in here? What are you doing in my room? This is my space. Maybe none of you have heard that, but when they're teens, often that can become a thing. I think not having locks on the door is a great idea. I think it's a great idea. In fact, one of our peer support, when he lost his first two kids and then he was remarried, and he said, God has given me a chance to raise kids the right way now. He has no doors on the room and they change in the bathroom. I mean, pretty extreme, but you got to realize where he came from. And so I'm going to leave these up here. Some of these are they've actually updated. I haven't been out buying lately. This is another way some of the pods look to fit into the ones that look just like a USB. I mean, you cannot tell they're not a USB for your computer. Huh? Yes, you can. Just get it. I know, but then I have to turn in the reimbursement at the hospital. I have to write on my requisition for reimbursement for training.
I don't know if you know, but the reason that they don't make the big smoke clouds anymore is because they found that if they burn the nicotine at a lower wattage, there's not the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're finding these e-cigarettes in these modification box, they're called box mods, is what they're called, or pod systems. And you'll find them, and they're only like 25 watts. And they're cheap. They're $25, $30 maybe online. You don't have to put in information, like your driver's license or anything like that, like I said. But that's how they get away, because the lower the wattage, there's no cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And so nobody knows. It's when they make the big clouds, that's when they're burning like the higher levels of 230 watts. Those are the ones that are definitely going to have a higher risk of exploding. But it's interesting because I walked into my sister's house a couple weeks ago and I was like, what am I smelling? And I mean, like I said, I had vaped for a good period of time. So I was on that whole, it's going to help me quit smoking.
Sure.
It's gonna be great. And I was finding myself spending more money on e-juice than I was on a pack of cigarettes because I was going through it more because it was fruity. It wasn't like,
It smells like candles.
exactly.
Right.
It's not a nasty cigarette, and I really don't want this in my mouth, but it's like I need that nicotine, and so it was like, oh, okay. And I found out my nephew had done it. He had ordered one online. He didn't have to put any information. He had my sister's credit card information, and my 13-year-old, or sorry, 13, I call him 13. He just turned 12. Nephew had bought this online and had it delivered.
And a lot of kids just get in their parents' billfolds and use their credit cards. And how many of you check every line of your credit card? I don't. Yeah, right. You have to relate. Okay, so I know you all have stressful moments. So here's some stress balls. Or you can throw them at your kids. Let me get them out of the bag here. So it is now by far the biggest gateway to drugs because of adding the addictive behaviors here. Pass out stress relievers. Their lungs. You can throw them at your kids, or you can.
Yeah, I've got all that stuff.
Here's the toothpicks. Have you seen much at school, David?
I haven't, but I know they're aware, and I know they have access.
I actually have a video that I would have shown if we had more time. That was done at Oak Hill. And our presenter said, how many of you in this, and there were probably 250 students, how many of you in here vape? And like 3 hands went up. And then they said, how many of you know someone who vape? Every hand went up. So you know who's telling the truth there. And Oak Hill's a good school, right? Yep, their lungs. Stress ball lungs. You can tell your kids when you show them this lung. I'll leave a few. Nope. Saving your lung. Yeah, I'm going to leave a bag for whoever, our helpers. We'll take the whole bag. Okay. I'm going to, do they take a break right now? Okay. Come up here. Yeah.
Are you gonna?
Yeah, I'll leave some of it here, wherever it's easier.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll have to take this stuff with me.
Yeah. Sure. Okay.